The following is a Live the Dream Media production.
Hello and welcome to the Faith Family Schools podcast with your host Christopher DeSimone.
All right, folks, welcome back to the latest episode of Faith Family Schools. Remember to go to faithfamilyschools.com, and of course, that'll lead you to all of our different platforms of Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube and Instagram, and all those good things out there. faithfamilyschools.com. If you want to suggest a guest or you react to something that we talk about, go to faithfamilyschools@gmail.com. And again, if you're new to the podcast, I'm a guy who does a morning radio show in Tucson, Arizona, which is kind of the petri dish for a lot of bad ideas nationally. And I've learned over 14 years of radio and working on campaigns and candidates and propositions that these are all speed bumps as society keeps kind of devolving and heading downhill. And so America's road back, I believe, is fixing the decay in faith, family, and schools. We've done a lot of school academic freedom stuff. We had a great discussion with Chris Collins from Oro Valley Church of the Nazarene, who's a young pastor. Go check that out. And I am happy to have my friend and the pastor and Father Matt Lowry. He's up at the Newman Center at Northern Arizona University, which is in Northern Arizona, in Flagstaff. Welcome aboard, my friend.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be here.
For the rookies out there, what's the Newman Center?
Newman Center is a Catholic center adjacent to a university where students of faith, Catholic students, can grow, receive sacraments, and engage in the conversation regarding truth in the university. I mean, Catholics helped start the university. They started the university process.
That's
and so
true.
We always want to stay in that conversation.
And so how long have you been a priest?
Been a priest about 16 years.
And how long have you been at the Newman Center?
15 years.
So would management at the Catholic Diocese of Phoenix consider that you've been there quite a lot longer than most cats in that position?
Yeah. Most assignments are much shorter than that, but usually in a parish, you need to change the pastor because the people are the same. But
Right.
where I'm at, the people change, so maybe it's okay to have the same pastor. And
Right.
And it's worked out well with my relationships with the university administration that there's a level of trust and communication that really helps, I think, both sides.
Absolutely. I think I've seen the effects of your presence in those relationships, and I know that pays off. So when did Father Matt first feel like he had the call?
I was back after high school, and
Okay.
I was looking at college and the rest of my life, and the question switched from everyone asks you, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to study in college? And I went on a retreat where the question changed. Instead, it was, what does God want you to do? And it was a different way of looking at it. I was like, that perhaps there's another perspective than my own. And so seeking to know him and learning more about what his happiness, his desire for my happiness led me to want what he wants even above what I want.
Were you super faithful religious Catholic up to that moment?
Pretty much. I asked questions, wandered a little bit, but I like Peter to Jesus, Lord, to whom else shall we go?
Right.
Like, where else am I going to go that just to find that love and meaning? And I also volunteered with my local parish, the youth group, and it challenged me to get out of my comfort zone. It challenged me to grow in faith. I'm like, I don't even know if I believe all this stuff. But as I walked out on the water, my faith increased, and I had a ton of fun along the way.
So you were not at the Newman Center your first year, and then you got to the Newman Center?
Mm-hmm.
What was your first year?
First year was in a parish in East Mesa, Holy Cross, and it was
I know that one well.
yeah, it's kind of a retirement parish, and
Superstition Springs Mall.
yeah, the church in the mall they call it. It's fun, but people, and they even said like, oh, there's not a whole lot of young people here. I'm like, well, I see a couple, and so we helped start a young adult group. I'm like, let's get them together. Let's have conversations. Let's have a meal, and there's young people everywhere.
So when the opportunity to go to the Newman, was it an opportunity or you're going to the Newman Center?
It was a congratulations. What do you say?
So what'd you think about that? Because Holy Cross is definitely a senior parish. Believe it or not, there's a giant community called Leisure World
Yes.
just north of it.
Yes, there. Yep, I came to know that well. At first I was a little nervous. I'm like, I just envisioned priesthood and a parish from womb to tomb. And I also thought to myself, I'm like, do college students even care about faith? And I felt like there would be a lot of hostility. And so I was nervous.
So when you got there, what did you find?
What I found was human beings who are made for God.
Right.
That people are people. And even to this day, I think there's a lot of people who have different ideas about the world and the human person than I do. But when I walk up and said, "Hi, I'm Father Matt. What's your name?" That 98% of the people will stick their hand back out and say, "Hi, oh, nice to meet you." And then we start on a human level, and then I ask questions. My joke is, I'll say to people like, "Tell me about yourself." And these young people say, "Well, you want me to talk about me? Where do I begin?" And so then they open up and they want to be known. We all want to be known, and I desire to know them, and so it's worked well.
And it's interesting, right? So you're in college, right? Especially the last several years, more isolation, right?
Mm-hmm.
More of staring at this thing,
Yeah,
all that jazz. But you're still seeing that human need for, once you introduce yourself and say, "Tell me about yourself," are they starving for that moment?
they're starving for it. We had an event a couple weeks ago. We called it a fall festival, and we had some simple games outside our front lawn. And somebody invested in this like those inflatable tube people or whatever, and some college kids walking by,
Which we usually see at used car lots.
That's exactly where you see it. And he goes, "I saw the big tube guy," and I said, "I have to find out what's going on." And so he walked up and like, "Hi," his name was Kai. I'm like, "Hey, Kai, nice to meet you, man. And so let me introduce you to some people." And so, I mean, that just tells me his heart is made for it. There was another girl. She was walking by an exchange student, and she was going in front of the Newman Center, and she heard someone speaking inside, and she happened to just pause, and she heard something that resonated with her heart, and she came up the sidewalk and came in to a building she'd never been, to a faith that she was not, that she's like, something stirred in her heart, and she responded.
Wow. So what are we finding? Because we know that I went to Northern Arizona. I went to this Newman Center, right, with our friend Father Mike. And so you're away from your parents for the first time. You're breaking the rhythm of, we always go to 9:15 Mass together as a family, right? You're on your own. No one's taking you to Mass. And at the same time, you are being bombarded by university with a variety of ideas. And sometimes they're into free speech over there, and sometimes they're not. So talk about that dynamic of these kids coming to university for the first time spiritually.
Well, I think most people are not looking for faith in college. There are a few, and no problem, they're going to find it.
Yeah.
But most of them are not. And so we try to make ourselves as obvious as possible, where they trip over me, so to speak, on campus and see me on social media and can't get away. And but what really helps us is students, inviting students. We had a young lady, freshman, and she was Catholic. Her roommate was not. Actually, the roommate's mother was Catholic, but the roommate was not. It was that freedom, like, I don't want to impose my values. And so she said to her roommate, she said, "Hey, do you want to come to this event? It's a back-to-school barbecue." And her friend's like, "Okay, sure. There's free food. Like, I'm open to that."
Free food's good for college kids.
It works out really well. There's actually, side note, there's a huge food insecurity with young people these days. College, universities, they spend all their money on tuition and rent. That food is the last thing they do. And so Jesus fed people, and so it's continued to be a really good thing to do.
Well, I would have never thought that going to college, that the idea that they'd be starving for actual food, or if they have some money, what they're doing is they're Uber eating their way to an extra 23 pounds. So if they hear Father Matt's got some, barbecued pork, coleslaw and tater salad,
or roasted pig,
right? Sounds really good.
So this girl shows up, and we meet her, and she has a great time. Turns out she's a really busy fall. She's involved with the athletics on campus. And so I see her occasionally, and then the spring comes around, and her roommate invites her to another social. She comes, and then she finds out that, her family was Catholic, but she didn't know that, and she wasn't raised Catholic. She's like, "I want to learn more about this." And so she starts coming to church, and she ends up getting baptized and finishes the year really engaged. And she showed me a picture, and it was her that first week holding that roasted pig head at the back-to-school barbecue. And it came full circle. But the key part of that was her friend brought her. As much as I will reach out to people, they expect that, like, "Oh, he's the church guy." But when their peers are inviting them, say, "This is good. You're going to enjoy this," they listen.
When you're dealing with students, what are some of the unexpected things you've run into about what they're dealing with, other than food insecurity, which I know most people don't even think about that. What are some of the kind of spiritual kind of crises that you're experiencing that maybe you didn't know was there? What's a typical?
I could have guessed that most people, when they go to college, they're going to get away from home. I think NAU is just a little above average, perhaps, that it feels like I'm close. My parents want me close, but it's far enough away that I can be myself. And so for the first time, they're standing on their own 2 feet, looking at the world through their own perspective, and they start to become more aware of the brokenness in their own lives, but in the brokenness in their family that exists because we're fallen human beings from original sin, and yet God has a plan to enter into that and redeem it. And so I think walking with people, there's more brokenness than I expected. There's a lot of family dynamics, and even people who seem like they have it together on the outside, that internally that we all, and I had to say and try to normalize it, like we all deal with that. The question is, what are you going to do about that? And are you going to seek your own healing? And I think there's a tendency in our culture now to kind of want to stay where I'm at and blame somebody.
Yes.
It's because of my parent did this, or this person did this to me. But it takes a really courageous person to say, okay, what am I going to do about it? I found myself in this situation, but I get to choose what I do about it. And so to seek counseling, to seek community, to put the phone down and talk to somebody, that I think they're discovering, especially in the community we've built, that interaction is really life-giving. We did a night where everybody comes in for their free dinner, and I called it a shake-up. I go, it's a Newman shake-up. Whatever color plate you have to sit at that table. And they were freaking out. Some people were trying to manipulate the plates, and people wanted to leave. But at the end of the night, what we noticed was that after the speaker finished, everybody stayed because they had more people to talk to now. They had met some new people, and they were enjoying it, and they wanted to spend more time talking to them. And I asked them, I said, did you guys enjoy that? Should we do that again? And they all said yes. We want to meet new people. We want to have conversations, but it takes a little prompting versus when they're sitting at the bus or in their class. Before class, this is different from when you and I were in college. Everybody's on their phone. And so these classrooms are completely silent before the teacher comes in because nobody's talking to each other. They're all on their phones or listening to their music.
Right.
And so they're yearning for that connection. We flourish in human connection.
Yeah, so we're more there. So there was always a loneliness factor when you and I went to college and people went away. But even with all of this stuff and the magic of the phone, they're more lonely than ever.
They are. Yeah, that's something I've seen increase in 15 years is the anxiety, the depression, the loneliness, and they're so anxious about putting themselves out there. I try to make it as easy as possible, but at some point they have to reach out. And the universities see this too. They know that connected students are going to be retained and thrive and all that. But it's so funny. At the same time they know that, they adopt these little robots that will deliver food to your door so you don't even have to walk outside. Or, we're
getting close to WALL-E, the cartoon.
It looks like WALL-E.
So how does the when you talk about their relationship with their parents, right? Because a lot of that's going to stem from that. How do they kind of deal, as you see them walk through with you for 3 or 4 years at the Newman Center? How are the parents reacting to this? Right? Are they going back to the parents and trying to fix that? Are the parents oblivious? What do you think?
Yeah, I think parents they're a little oblivious because they've just been in their systems longer and whatnot. I think whenever in a family system, when one part changes, it affects the whole system. So in a good way, if somebody becomes a little healthier, then the whole system can be invited to become healthier. I hand out a lot of books called Boundaries by Drs. Cloud and Townsend. Okay. But I do see people. One challenge is the student might grow in faith, but the family doesn't so much. That people will come, especially now I'm getting students who they went through COVID at home and they stopped going to church. And so the family's still not going to church, but now the young person starts to come back. And so when they go home for the summer or the break, they're trying to invite their family to go back to Mass. And some of that really happens.
That's good.
There was a powerful story years ago. This mom came by with her daughter to the orientation table and she said, I hear the mom say, "Hey, honey, look, there's a Catholic table." And the daughter says, "Mom, I'm not sure I want to be Catholic anymore." And to which I reply, "That's okay." To which the mom replies to me, "No, it's not okay."
I'm gonna write your bishop.
Yeah, and they looked at me inquisitively, like just wondering, and I said, I just want you to know that we're here and you're always welcome. Well, this young lady, she was curious enough, and it was like different than the message she had heard before, that she came to one of those Welcome Week events, and she met another freshman. She met one of our missionaries that were there, and she had a good time. They exchanged numbers. They invited, said, "Hey, we're going to come back, 2 days from now. Come back." The girl ends up coming back, and then comes back again, and ends up reigniting her faith. She was a women and gender studies major on campus and continued to do that, but her faith grew at the same time. She ended up going to a retreat, a conference, and she comes back and tells her parents, "Hey, Mom and Dad, like, you can have a relationship with Jesus." And her parents are like, "Yes, honey, we know." And she's like, "No, you don't understand. You can have a relationship with Jesus." She ends up leaving a book. She wants her dad to read this book, so she leaves it in the bathroom. And he kind of reads it. He ends up having
Was it Boundaries?
No, it was not Boundaries.
Okay.
It was a book. It was Made for More by Curtis Martin.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like a C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity type book for the modern person.
Gotcha.
And so he ends up having a conversion, joining a Bible study, and then fast forward, kind of sadly, but he ends up getting pancreatic cancer.
Oh, my Lord.
He loses his job even before that. He's like, all right, I'm going to join a second Bible study. And in the end, it was the daughter coming back to faith that led her father back to faith, which prepared him for death. And he said to me, "Father, I don't want to die and leave my 2 daughters and my wife, but I can't wait to go be with Jesus." And that he gave his family a greater gift, a witness of faith and dying with dignity. And it came because his daughter encountered the faith.
Walk by the orientation table at the Newman Center.
Come on by.
Let's talk about the power of presence, right? Because here you are. How big is NAU now?
20,000 on the main campus.
So you have 20,000, and you have academics and all that going on. And I know that you're involved with football team, basketball team, but you do a lot of stuff on campus. Talk about the power of presence just being on the middle of a state university campus.
Yeah, so we were out there tailgating before the football games, and I'm walking through the Greek row where they're doing the beer die now. They throw the dice in the air and all that. And they don't know what to do with me, but when they're drunk, they're much more willing to talk to me, and that's great.
So I was at tailgate for homecoming.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't believe how much liquor was bouncing around a state university.
Yeah. But, I'm also out there. I have lunch every Monday on campus, and I fill my glass half full and then keep filling it so I can wander around and see who's around, meet people. But I joined a 3-on-3 basketball team a couple weeks ago, and I walk into the gym, and I look around, and I recognize somebody on every single team. I was like, I know that guy's. I don't know his name, but I know him, and so I just start going around, and everyone knows that I'm the priest, even though I'm not wearing clerics at that time. But that's where those conversations happen. I was on the sideline of the football game, and one of the football players leaned over and said, "Father, what time's Mass on Sunday? It's been a while." And I was like, "Come on back, bro." And so it helps me realize, this model of opening the door and waiting for people to come, it's gone. That we are in a missionary time, an apostolic mission time, and so we have to go out and encounter people where they are.
Let's talk about someone who has no Catholic connection, and you're sitting in the student union having your half-drink cup of coffee near the Chick-fil-A back there. Give me an example of someone not Catholic who's just seen you in the collar and walked up to you and just started talking to you.
Well, I'll say it this way. At graduation this past year, when I walked around, half the people I knew were not Catholic.
Right.
And it made me feel pretty good about, like, I've been visible, I've been present, I've been meeting people who aren't Catholic. This girl after Mass 2 weeks ago, she stopped, and I seen her twice recently, but not for a while before that. And she just said, "Father Matt, I just want you to know the power of your presence on campus." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, thank you." And she said, "No, you don't understand." She's like, "My freshman year, I brought my roommate to a social, and then you saw her like the next week on campus, and you called her by name and said, 'Hey, how are you?' To this day, she says, 'How's Father Matt doing? Did you see him? Tell him I said hi.'"
Right.
And it's the relationship is what leads to the relationship with God. And so it's been powerful. One day at the beginning of two years ago, I was walking by, and there's a new dean of students. We've had like 4 and 5 years, which is not a good sign. And so I'm like, I don't know who the dean of students is. And so I go and I'm like, hi, is the dean of students around? Which is, an administrator should never be available. They're always so busy, right? And then a few minutes later, she comes out. She's like, oh, she wants to say hi to you. And I'm like, oh. So I go into her office and she said, Father Matt, this is interesting. She goes, on Friday, I wrote a note, reach out to Father Matt, because I had a question about faith and I didn't know what to do about it. And now it's Monday and you're sitting here in my office.
Wow.
And I said, well, that's what I would call the Holy Spirit. She said, I would call that manifesting. I was like, oh, we don't need to talk about that. And to the modern world, faith and hope and Holy Spirit is now manifesting. If you think about it, you can make it happen, but it's not helping us.
Correct. Let's talk about what are you learning from over this 14 years from the experience and the students? What have you, so, Father Matt of 14, 15 years ago to Father Matt from today, what have you learned?
Yeah, I think it's the old adage is the more I've learned, the more I realize I don't know. But it makes me humble and curious about the person in front of me. I've had several transgender students come through the Newman Center, and people of the LGBTQ community, they feel welcome and accepted as they are there, even though we're very clear on, human sexuality and the unity of the person and all that kind of stuff. But there's something in them that's yearning for God, for truth, for peace that only Christ can give. And so it's interesting to talk to them just to learn, because I'm just curious. I'm like, I don't know what that's like. On the outside, it seems so obvious, but I'm curious about your experience. And to them, it's so clear in that, like, I am this way. This is who I am. And I'm like, wow. So it's just revealing. It's helping me to understand them. And I'm trying to ask God, ask them, like, how do I journey with this person and help them to find greater peace and unity and understanding of who they are? And so I honestly, at the end of the day, I'm left with more questions than answers. And I'm like, God, I don't understand. I'm just going to journey and accompany this person. And when that door opens, I'll be ready to help them in whatever way. But so I feel kind of helpless in giving you that answer, but that's kind of where I've come to is I don't know what the answer in our society too. You talk about we're, kind of heading down and the speed bumps, and it's like, yeah, I see that. And I'm like, the one lifeline is Christ, is God. Like, I don't know. And maybe he's allowing that because it gets our attention at times to reach for him.
If you were, you could sit down with a mom and dad and the kid in their senior year of high school before they went to college, what would Father Matt what would be the Father Matt primer for going to college?
Well, a couple things. One is, I would say when you visit a college, it's good to visit the Newman Center. Look around, and it doesn't have to be too strong, but like the parents can say to their son or daughter, hey, we're going to go by and take a look, and here's the church where you can go to mass or whatever. Right. And then like meet somebody, like call ahead, be like, hey, we're coming by it too, and then make sure there's a student there that like to make a connection. Yeah. I think when parents visit their child in college, it's like time it for like, hey, we're going to go to mass and then brunch afterwards or something. But then what I tell parents is relax, like take a breath, and give your child freedom. That it makes me think of the prodigal son story when he's like, I want to go take off and make some really bad decisions. And the father's like, okay. He welcomes him back, but he first lets him walk away. And I think parents who want to guide everything, like we're beyond the helicopter parents. We got the Zamboni parents who want to make it so smooth that there's no issues. But instead of giving them the tools and teaching them how to face the difficulties, that to say, you know what, you don't have to ever go to church ever again the rest of your life, and I'll never stop loving you. But I want your happiness, and so I want you to go. I want you to have a relationship with God because I think it's what's best for you, but you have to choose that. Yep. And I think it kind of twists the circuits a little bit because most students are like, oh, my parents just tell me what to do all the time. But instead, they're respecting my freedom. And then also having conversations where the parents ask the child and say, well, what do you think about that? And not like try to convince them, be like, but what makes you say that? What makes you think you're right? Well, what about this situation? Okay. And to recognize that as parents, it's not about winning every conversation. It's about, maintaining the relationship over the series of battles. That if we can keep the relationship, that we can have really honest conversations and disagree and keep the respect, that long-term is so much healthier.
So you are known possibly as the TikTok priest, right? So what I love about what you do, and I assume you had a student who pushed you into this arena. Talk about how you do. I think you do an amazing job on social media, and that's part of the new battleground, right? Live the Dream Media does a great job. I just want to tell everyone that. But tell me about getting into the world of social media. How did that happen?
Well, it was during COVID, and so I really felt like that people can't come to me right now, then I want to go to them. And so I had a student and a staff member, and they said, "Hey, Father, we're going to film this little video. Here's what we need you to do." And it was silly. It's one of those where you jump in the air wearing one thing or being in one place, and then when you land, you're in a different place.
Right.
And so we were trying to communicate a message that we were moving locations, and so we did it, and people kind of liked it. A little bit of response, like, "Oh, okay."
So usually it's young ladies. They change their outfits.
Yes.
Right? So they jump up, they land, they change their outfit.
Totally.
Now, have you done this with seasonal vestments yet?
Yeah. So I have done that. See, we're on the same wavelength. So that was so we did it a couple of times. Then our fourth video was exactly that. It was the clothes changing. And so they said, we do that as Catholics. We wear these different colors to signify different things. And so let's make a little educational thing or whatever. Well, people lost their minds because they knew the trend with the young ladies or whatnot. And then maybe they had gone to church growing up, maybe not. But they knew enough to be like, wait a minute. Oh, that's funny. And the timing was pretty good. And so it got picked up by Fox News. So people in Florida and New York are texting me, "Hey, man, I just saw you on the TV." I got a message from someone in Mexico. They're like, "Hey, man, you went viral on Univision in Mexico." And so, anyways, and so we've realized that that people are listening. And so I'll preach to a couple hundred people on Sunday, but then I'll do a homily in a minute, and it'll reach 15,000 people. Or so what we've done now is, people do Facebook Live, we do TikTok Live, and this past week I reached 29,000 different people who were firing angry comments and questions, and we actually had a good discussion. But it gave a chance for people to hear some bits of truth and goodness that they might not hear otherwise. And even my Sunday congregation, I might preach to a couple hundred people, but online, my homily in a minute will reach like 15,000 people.
You have such a following doing what you're doing that you even got Marky Mark and the Father Stew people that come do some cross promote.
Yeah, they were looking for ways to promote Father Stew, and so they reached out and said, "Hey, will you help promote this movie?" And it turned out he was going to Phoenix for a promo, and I said, "Hey, I live in Arizona. I'll meet up with Marky Mark and we can do something in person." And it threw me off because they said he's not going to say anything, and it has got to be very straight laced and whatever. And so
that seems so unbarking Mark-like.
I know.
Have some fun.
They were worried about the liability of it. So I said something, and then all of a sudden Mark Wahlberg starts talking to me, and I was like, he's talking to me. That threw me off. But it was pretty fun. But of course, TikTok didn't promote that, but it was fun to put it out there.
Are we seeing that in the church overall? Is this starting to become a thing? Are you really the exception to the rule out there?
There's about 4 priests that probably about half a dozen priests that I'm aware of on social media, and they're really trying to do.
Is this in the Diocese of Tucson or in America?
There's one in Phoenix, and the rest are spread throughout the country.
Gotcha.
And they're actually being invited to speak at conferences now because people know who they are. They become famous.
Right.
And I know for us, we do about 50% kind of fun, joyful. Christ came that his joy might be in us and our joy complete. And so it's just joyful and fun and childlike. But then the other half of the time, it's serious content. It's, I'll do commentaries on anxiety or dating or faith and belief and things like that. And so they come for the sizzle, but they stay for the steak.
So let's talk about where we're at now with these. You and I were talking off air with Dave a little bit about Gen Z, millennial, and kind of where they're at with the craziness of the world, right? The amount of atheism running out there, the amount of bad information, no information. It's really seems messier than ever right now. So talk about that, though, like the college student running into that, but also the kids that are jumping into what you guys are doing at the Newman Center and how they're dealing with that.
Yeah, I feel like the message in the culture is so strong that in order to stand up to it, you have to have a thick skin and you have to kind of push back. And so you see that in politics. It's like we're coming at each other so strong. We've lost the art of just having a conversation and listening. And so you see two responses. Either you have to be thick and in your face, and you also see there's a lot of autism and stuff. That's another thing I've seen over the years. There's a lot more people on the spectrum, or at least with low levels of social skills.
Right.
And so they tend to also, they're learning, like, if you want to be heard, you just have to make yourself heard. And it's a big turnoff. Or you just submarine and you're just quiet. And so you might be absorbing what the culture is feeding you, or you might disagree, but you're not going to say anything because that professor is going to fail you and kick you out or whatever. And so you see a lot of people kind of submarining. But when they see other people speaking out, they have more courage to speak out. We had a speaker come on campus a few weeks ago. She works with Students for Life, and she had a team where they had a microphone and they wanted to engage people on the topic of abortion. And I think that's what needs to happen, because that's when people...
Is that the Newman Center or on campus?
On campus.
Okay.
Yeah, it kind of was independent of the Newman Center.
Right.
And we have to engage with people, because that's how minds change. And that's where parents, earlier I said, that's where it can come in, of like drawing out what they believe and why. That's how their mind is going to be changed, not because they received a lecture from their parents. And so she was out there engaging people, and at first the students were so apathetic. They're like, just ignore it. If you don't like it, just ignore it. Just mute them, silence them, whatever. And so then they started being more provocative in their statements. They're like, she's going to take away your abortion access. And so that got their attention. But then she could have a dialogue with them. And this one girl was walking around the back, and she was just talking to people. She's like, hey, what do you think about this? And she's this nice girl, sophomore. And people are like, well, I don't know. And they started saying, well, I think this. And she's like, why do you think that? Well, what about this? Well, what do you think? What is abortion? When does life begin? What rights does a unborn life have? And by the end, the person's like, wow, you make a lot of sense. And actually, no one's ever listened to me from the other side. And so these students are learning how to engage people. A couple of days later, apparently there was a pro-choice march down to City Hall. And so I just saw these 4 students leave the Newman Center with these signs. I'm like, I don't know where they're going, but they have signs. And apparently there were 5 pro-choice people on one side of the street, and there were 4 pro-life people on the other side. The pro-life people were in the light, in the sun, and so people could actually see when they were driving. It was family weekend, so all these families come by with like strollers and kids. And so all these pro-choice people are watching all these families interact with these students, and all the people support them driving by. And I think it was just the students said, we just want to let them know that we're here, that's not the only opinion on campus, because otherwise that's all we ever hear.
Correct. Let's talk about, it's coming back to me now. I had a great question. It's not my great question in my brain. Are the students from certain parts of being in the university life feel like their faith is attacked?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there was one student who told me that in their classroom, the teacher said it was the Planned Parenthood, whether we fund them or not. They're like, if you think Planned Parenthood helps poor women to receive resources and that they would never get otherwise, stand on this side of the room. And if you're closed-minded and you don't want to help poor people, then stand on this side of the room and you're anti-Planned Parenthood. And so there was just 2 girls from the Newman Center, like against the whole class. So the teacher set up a situation that became hostile to the students. And so that happens a fair amount.
Yep. And that's just got to stay strong. And
there was one girl that she pushed back, where she came and talked to me, and she's like, Father Matt, I had enough. And I'm like, what do you mean? The teacher was going around the first day of class, which is what they do on college campuses now, and they say, everybody say your name and say your pronouns. And when they got to her, she's like, I'm not going to do that. and the teacher didn't know what to do with that. And I'm like, and then what happened? She's like, she gave up and moved on. And afterwards, other students came up to her and they said, thank you for saying something.
Right.
And having the courage to do that. Yep.
So let's talk about for the future, for the parents that are watching this, and hopefully some of those young college kids that are listening. What is your hope for the future as we see this next generation move through, of how they can be the change, as we're about faith, family, and schools. Yeah. Talk about that younger generation and what you're seeing that gives you hope for the next so many years.
Yeah, it's almost like when it's so dark out, the light stands out a little more. Yeah. And so the people are seeing that this is not helpful, and so gravitate towards the light, find people, find community. So in person for sure, find your Newman Center, find a Christian community and then also look online for resources and support that help you to know, like to equip you, and they'll teach you how to further engage on your campus.
So for you, when you see when you look at like measures of success as a guy who's a pastor of a Newman Center, what's the measures of success? You and Father Anthony are there now. What's that look like? What's a measure of success when you're at?
For me, my ultimate measure of success is 5 years after graduation, people are not just keeping the faith, but they're sharing the faith in whatever community they're in, that they're active in their parishes and churches, that they're starting young adult groups, they're starting Bible studies, that they're just like education, right? You learn the most by teaching. And so we're trying to equip our young people to be able to lifelong Catholic Christians. And so even during college, trying to teach them to lead their own Bible study, to walk with somebody in discipleship, to mentor somebody. And so when we see that happening and we see people building and making their own community, that to us, that's success.
That example is massive.
Well, it's because in our culture today, this young people, like the millennials, everyone wants to be fed. Everyone's so passive. I pick up my phone and I'm entertained, and so I want to teach them how to create content, so to speak. I want to teach them how to be active in creating a world that they want to be in.
It's my overused St. Francis quote, right? Preach the gospel at all times. When necessary, use words. Mm-hmm. You're living it, my friend.
Praise God. Thank you.
Before my last question for you is, you mentioned a couple of these different books out there that are helpful in these situations. Could you give me 2 to 4 of those? Again, you named a couple, but just so people are listening, kind of some resources they can search out there that you like.
I really like Boundaries by Drs. Cloud and Townsend. Made for More is a good book by Curtis Martin.
So talk about boundaries just real quick. What's the gist of it?
Boundaries, I think of like so you come from a family where you're kind of in a family system, and then now all of a sudden you're living 4 feet away from somebody that you didn't know before in a dorm room, and then you're working with a small group and that person's not doing their work, and then the teacher gives you a hard time, and then you're in a dating relationship where there's enmeshment, and then you break up and don't know what to do, and then you go to work and there's difficult situations. So Boundaries is all about relationships and trying to navigate what is healthy. And just because I experienced it in my own life doesn't mean it's the right way to do it.
Is it written in a Christian Catholic?
It is. It's a Christian book.
Okay.
Drs. Cloud and Townsend, and Christian perspective. And I think of the image of a yard, like this is my yard, and Christ is the one who knocks at the door and wants to come in and have supper with us. And so I have my own yard that I can work on. My parents want things for my yard, but that's their wants for my yard. But this is my yard, and I get to decide.
Right.
And so recognizing what's in my yard and what's in other people's yards is really healthy.
And the second one you said,
the
one that changed that man's life in the bathroom.
yeah, that's right. Made for More by Curtis Martin.
Okay.
It's a lot like the C.S. Lewis book of Mere Christianity, but Mere Christianity can be a little more intellectual and philosophical. This one's supposed to be a little more approachable for people to kind of like, it makes sense that we need faith and that God exists and Christ is the answer.
All right. So how do the folks out there follow you on social media after we just said you're a social media guy?
Yeah. So Instagram is Catholic_Jacks, Jacks, because we're the lumberjacks in Flagstaff.
Yep.
And then TikTok is just Catholic Jacks, no underscore, Jacks.
All right. Well, thanks for what you do. I appreciate what you do, and you made a difference in my daughter's life who went through the Newman Center there, and God bless you, man. Keep
Praise
up the
God.
great work.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, that's Father Matt Lowry. Is at the Newman Center, a Catholic Newman Center up in Flagstaff at Northern Arizona University. Check him out at Catholic Jacks at TikTok, and then Catholic_Jacks at the Instagram, as we say. If you like what you hear, I hate saying. I remember I say don't hit smash a like. We're not smashing anything. You could press like. That's nice. We like that. And remember, if you have any questions or guests that you want us to interview and talk to, go to faithfamilyschools@gmail.com. And then remember, recommend Faith Family Schools to all your friends out there. Let me do that again. faithfamilyschools@gmail.com. I'll say that right. And the website is faithfamilyschools.com. You guys have a great day. Thanks for watching and listening. And I hope we keep earning your faith in future episodes. Thank you.